Well, hello, friends. John, your whiskey neighbor here, and it's another Tuesday night, which means I have a special guest to join the channel and talk with us about whiskey and making whiskey in Canada. With us today is John Cote, master distiller, owner of a generational farm out of Saskatchewan. John, welcome to the channel.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here.
I just want to thank you for, yes, taking the time to be here, but also for talking and sharing and really speaking to the Canadian whiskey scene. We'll see who joins us tonight, but I want to let you know, John, often we get way more on the replay. So we'll keep the conversation here, and it might be a small group, but let's also think forward to like who else might be dropping in and what other questions might come to them, and we'll get the right stuff across. That make sense?
Sounds good.
Okay. Now, some people, you and I had a conversation a year ago, I believe. I think something like that.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had said, I had seen, here, one of your good-looking Southeast 11 whiskey bottles, but I had seen it on a UK channel. And I was like, how is this possible? A beautiful looking farm, lovely whiskey being made near Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm a Canadian, and I don't even know about that. Talk to me about your journey about making whiskey and how it almost seemed, maybe it didn't, it just seemed like you kind of went big international while you're also growing your home market. Can you tell me a bit about that startup?
Oh gosh, that's let me think a little bit to formulate a good answer. So it kind of comes from our background. So our expertise is farming. That's what we've done all of our lives. But during our farming career, we were quite lucky. We had, won a couple of awards and done stuff like that. But we ended up traveling extensively internationally. So between, we had farmed or taught farming or learned about farming on every continent except the Antarctic and Africa by the time we had started this business. And so it was logical for us to say, okay, if we're going to make, we felt our advantage that we could have, or from a business perspective, they always say you should have that unique selling point. Well, we thought our unique selling point was we had the knowledge and the experience to grow better grain than everybody else. Where could we market it? It's marketing, to the world. And so we actually started selling our whiskey in the UK. Now we sell into China, into the Emirates, mostly Abu Dhabi and Dubai, a little bit into Germany, and then Alberta, which we consider almost like a different country.
Yeah. Okay.
No, in a good way. So, like across Canada, it is really difficult to negotiate going between province to province, and it is as a small distiller, it's easier for us to do the paperwork to ship. We've got a shipment going out to the UK tomorrow, and it'll take me half an hour to do the paperwork on it, and you're in the marketplace. For me to go to Manitoba, it is not that easy.
Yeah.
In fact, provincially, if you don't have a functioning fax machine, you could be out of luck, which gets to be a little bit of a problem some days.
That's kind of crazy. And thank you for clarifying that, because, in today's conversation, like, we're not another nation. We're happily part of Canada and remaining so. Just want to say that. And I hope that we can reduce the barriers between our provinces. I don't want to turn this political, but we make a lot of stuff in Alberta that we'd like to sell across Canada that seems pretty tough for us to do. And in this industry, whiskey, I think it's excellent if we can figure out how to move alcohol more easily across the provinces. We've got,
and it's not just alcohol; it's all these products that we're really proud of as Canadians. That, oh my goodness, they're like, the things that they're doing in BC and the things they're doing in, all across Canada, across different areas. It's absolutely ludicrous that we don't have the option as consumers to celebrate along with everybody else, is saying, no, we've got really smart people involved in a whole bunch of different industries who let's push that forward. So yeah, I agree with you.
Awesome. I want to try something, John, to show to people tuning in, and I've never done this with this software, so bear with me, but I want to share your website. And the reason why I want to do that, just very briefly, is so that our users, if maybe they haven't gone there or haven't seen it, So hopefully this is going to come across, and this is just your homepage, so it should be something that you know about. And I just want to say, like, if I look at this as a consumer and I see certain parts, like, look at that beautiful winter, and what are you doing here? You're brushing snow off the cask. What's happening there?
Well, we are probably the only distiller in the world that stores their whiskey barrels outside, let alone their whiskey barrels outside in the middle of the Canadian prairies, where the temperature fluctuations are from, minus 40 on a real bad day and plus 40 on another real bad day, but everything in between. So we wanted to be able to connect. So whiskey in Canada suffers a little bit from around a lack of definition.
Okay.
And so we felt that, again, that's probably an opportunity for us to really define here, what does it mean to be Canadian whiskey? So it's using the crops that we're actually growing out in our fields, doing everything, like at the distillery, and then when it comes to aging, putting those barrels outside, letting them be exposed to the elements and seeing how that turns out. So everything that we do, in fact, about a month ago, we've set up with a neighboring business now, and we're actually starting to make our own barrels. So we've got wood coming from Ontario. So really trying to put that Canadian stamp on here. This is all a Canadian. This is about as Canadian as what you're going to get.
And while you were unpacking that, some of the images we saw as well, and you started our conversation, we talked about internationally, we have, I'm just going to say, the best grains possible on an international scale, just amazing. And then part of your website celebrates that as well. As you just described, the grains that you grow are absolutely second to none and lead to an amazing, awesome whiskey.
Yeah, and it's the absolute truth. So being involved in agriculture around the world, there's actually only 2 spots in the world that I know of that have similar growing conditions, and that is here and kind of in the center of the steppes of Russia. So I had worked the opportunity to work for a few years on farms in Kazakhstan, and very similar conditions to here, grow very similar crops, and it's all weather related, that we have certain fluctuations in weather here on the prairies that you can't replicate anywhere else in the world. It leads to really high quality grain, and it makes for a better product. It's just like going to your local chef and giving him the best cut of meat. He can make you an amazing meal. He'll still make you a good meal with a poor cut of meat, but if you give him really good quality ingredients, the end product is that much better.
Love that. And you let a new evolving thing drop. I mean, I've been to your website. I'm aware of where you are roughly. Beautiful, beautiful place to grow, as you described. The perfect cut of meat for a great, great meal. But now you have a cooper, or you have a wood, or like what is that? Where are you partnering? Is it within Canada somewhere?
So what we did is we've got a neighbor. They run a little business called Lost River Timber. And they had approached us 4 years ago, and they said, well, what do you think of the idea of making your own barrels? And I said, well, I would love to, but I don't have the time to do that. He says, their business is really busy during the summer, and it's not so busy during the winter. So maybe we could do a little bit of a collaboration. So we went out and we bought a bunch of oak 4 years ago, and we brought it all here, and it's been seasoning here for the last 4 years. And so this spring, we actually just started the project of starting to put some of that wood into barrels and seeing where we can. It's all just very small, and it's all very much by hand. But yeah. I think the quality of the barrels are going to be amazing. Because the barrels are outside, we just can't go and buy a barrel off the street and expect it to survive outside. Those barrels get quite a bit of pressure. We have probes in them that measure the pressure, and they'll get up to 6-7 pounds pressure on a barrel, which that's fine for a pressurized container, but wood is not made to withstand that. So you'll have the heads warp, the bands break, lots of stuff can happen.
Yes, I don't know technically, but I understand what you're saying. If they're under that kind of push. In fact, when I did have a chance to open up, wrong view. I did cheat. You sent three beautiful bottles, just to remind yourself. And I want to talk about each of these pretty much next. But I did open up the cask strength Triticale because I wanted to get a sense of, how did it compare to this, right? One's at 48, one's at 58. It seems to me like the cask strength is older because they both say the same crop year. So I assume the cask strength stayed a little longer in the oak, but I definitely described the push-pull that has to be happening across that minus 40, plus 40 prairie climate that you've got going on.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. And yet, so again, like if I put my business hat on, it makes it a little bit complicated when you're talking to a consumer and saying each cask is an individual. So those two bottles actually would have been made fairly closely to each other. It's not a big age difference in them. We actually bottled them. They both would have been, harvested probably within 6 months of each other. So there wasn't a big difference there, but depending on where they are in the racks and how much sunshine they get on them, it makes a huge difference in the way that they mature. And so what's happening, if you can imagine those barrels, they're sitting outside, and when the sun hits them during the day, they create all this pressure, and that drives the whiskey really into the wood.
Yeah.
And at night, when it cools down or you get a little rain shower coming through in the afternoon, it actually creates a vacuum inside the barrel because it's cooling off so quickly. And when it does that, it's physically extracting the whiskey out of the wood and out of all the little crevices where it's typically leaking and evaporating. And it just has so much stuff going on that it's different. I had a customer that came and they had bought two barrels, and one was on the upper rack and one was on the lower rack. You could tell they were the same whiskey, but they were substantially different. They were just so delighted that they didn't have, two barrels exactly the same.
So, some like you have a lot of information here, and you have that certificate program. Oh, I should say, I'll take it off one of these other bottles. For anyone tuning in, on the top of your bottles, you've got this, I call it a copper penny. I don't know what you call it, but this copper token.
Yeah.
And it has a code, a serial number. When you put it in, you get a certificate of authenticity, and it also gives you more insight and more information. But I didn't really get the sense, and you're telling me this now, is that not only is this, single grain and it's cask strength, but this is a single cask product?
Yes. Yeah. So every bottle that we produce is typically comes from a single cask. The only exception to that rule is our blended whiskey, where we take what I think are the four strongest whiskeys that we have. And my accountant hates me because we take them all and we create only 500 bottles of a blend to try and make that is our premium whiskey by taking, all the other ones and trying to create something absolutely wonderful.
Okay, well, let's talk. I don't want to drop this. And by the way, I have not opened the bottle, but I did remove the plastic because whoever seals your bottle is excellent at their job. It's very difficult for me to open them. So I've taken the plastic off already, as not to embarrass myself. And right here I have, or I'll zoom in a little bit so people can see me. This is the blended that you're mentioning. This is the one that I'd like you to talk a little bit about, like you said, best four or top four or something, four whiskeys.
Yeah,
so what goes in
the blend is actually a fun project. So, and I put this out there to the people that end up watching this video, is that we're always looking for people to help, because blending is really tough. People that are good at blending, there is a lot of work, because what we do is we start with a theme. So this year's theme is exploration. So we wanted to look at here, if we're going to explore whiskey, what does that really mean? So we want to explore different flavors. So we started with a backbone of a malt whiskey, and we thought, well, people, they understand malt whiskey. So this is starting out at your, at base camp, and now you're going to go for a hike and you're going to look for different flavors. So we used some rye whiskey that we had barrel aged in a nice wine barrel, and it was still, it's actually quite interesting. So I do this kind of online, like what we're doing, and I've got friends in the UK and all over the place, and I send them samples, and then we just sit down, we chat about it, and there was just something not quite right. And so my youngest son, who kind of kicks around the distillery every once in a while, he's got a pretty good palate on him, and
Nice.
he says we should put some wheat whiskey in there, just a little bit, and so it's got just a hint of wheat, and that brought out, it just livened it up, and it became just absolutely stunning. So it's we're really proud of this one. It turned out very, very nicely.
I haven't had it yet. Looks wonderful, and I like the story. I love a story in whiskey. Start with single malt, add a splash of rye, a little bit, and that extra wheat that you said just made it all just come together is fantastic. Now, wait, I missed one. You said single malt, like your malted barley, and then
So there's two different malt
okay,
whiskeys in there, and again, one from they had aged out differently, so made at the same time, but
okay,
they were considerably different. One had quite a bit of tannin in the background,
yeah,
so it was really interesting, and the other one was just that smooth. You know how sometimes you get a whiskey that just kind of coats the inside of your mouth. That was its characteristic, but it was kind of it was beautiful on its own, but it didn't have that little pop that the other one gave it. So we actually used two different malt whiskeys in it.
okay. Well, are you just gonna talk me through enjoying a little bit? Do you have a little bit of this?
I do. I just so happen to have a little bit here.
Oh, and while you're pouring, I do want to say online, a few people more have joined us. I see some Canadian down there, like JP Weiser's 23 Cask. That'll be interesting when I get to the Triticale Cask strength. And several people have already commented on the beautiful color of this whiskey. And I will say, you put right on here, non-chill filtered, natural color, and I really appreciate that. Oh, John, I lost you.
Oh no, I'm back.
Oh, did I lock you up? Did I shock you?
No. That's the fun part of running a distillery on a farm is internet access is sometimes a little. So it's actually there's a kind of a fun story in that. So when we set up our outdoor storage, it's actually like it's a fully bonded excise warehouse, and it's been inspected. So we had to put quite an investment into the security that goes around that, and that meant making sure we had a big wireless tower and then running fiber optic cables all over the farm and things that we had never thought we would ever do farming, 20 years ago for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I thought briefly, because I have looked at these, this is my first time opening them, and I have definitely read that non-chill filtered natural color. But with your pause, I thought, maybe this one's not that, but it says both of those things.
Yeah. So no, and this is actually really important. So in the markets that we service, in some of the best Michelin star restaurants in the world, the Four Seasons hotels, authenticity means everything.
Yeah.
And it's just if we weren't absolutely open to like letting everybody see, and there's actually a big glass door in the distillery where you can see what's going on every day. It's exactly what we stand for. So I always say, if you're buying a bottle of our whiskey, you're not just buying our whiskey, you're buying myself and my wife, because that's what stands behind it. So when we say it's not chill filtered, or if it's something is happening, that's exactly what it is. And if it doesn't turn out, and I think this is the problem that people don't realize. So if it doesn't turn out, a lot of companies would still put that into the marketplace somewhere. And for us, we never put anything that we're not proud of out into the marketplace. So we have some surprises coming up in the future from some of those things that, oh, geez, that's not quite right. We're not going to put that out in the marketplace. So we're actually making a whiskey liqueur that we'll release this summer. And it's turning out we're quite happy with it so far.
Well, no Michelin star here, but I appreciate the integrity of this type of release where we have some insight. I like the extra information that comes when you put in the code, and that natural non-chill and that transparency of what's going on. Just from a whiskey geek, really appreciate that. And it's something that I also really appreciate in Canadian whiskey, because internationally with that 909 rule, we get beat up a little bit with what are you hiding in your whiskey? What are you tossing around in there that you can legally cover up and still call it a whiskey? Now, I've heard people talk about the creativity that the 909, and you can, get into that with me as well. And I can conceive of that, but in the circles that I run around in, transparency, clarity, let us know what's in here, actually what's in here, and don't hide anything.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like, as a consumer, that's what I want. If I'm going to pay a premium for something, which you would basically from any craft distillery around, I kind of want to know, are you actually making your own whiskey? What's in it? I want to know what it is, because I'm making an extra effort to support you. So I absolutely agree with you.
Good to hear. And I have to say, I've been nosing this while we're talking, and this, perhaps it's the story that's drawing me in, but I want to share that it is an enveloping and well-rounded nose. By that, I mean, yeah, I've got some sweet vanillas and some lighter toffees, that kind of thing going on, but there's, I say things like a creaminess, and that's a tough thing for a nose, especially if you don't drink a lot of whiskey, because whiskey isn't creamy like a cream liqueur, but it evokes that sense of not pungent, but togetherness, and I get that on the nose.
Yeah. We all, often, and that comes from selling whiskey into the UK. But clotted cream that you have on your a tea in the afternoon, that's what I get from it. It's like that. Like clotted cream it's not as heavy as what you would think. But it is. It's got that. You're anticipating that when you taste it, it's just going to coat your mouth, right?
Well, cheers to some good whiskey.
So what I find most interesting about this is that it kind of, to me, it really accomplished what we had set out for in the goals. Is if you're going to explore the flavors of whiskey, there is a background of malt in there that you totally recognize. But you can definitely pull out all those rye flavors, like the cinnamon and the clove and the pepper. And it just all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting that. And the finish is that's what's lingering. It just keeps on coming and keeps on coming, and just makes you want to try a little bit more again.
I'm with you with the malt cereals. That creaminess in the nose is present more in body. For me, the pepper, or the like you mentioned, the spicing is there, but it's not screaming at me. I don't know how much rye is in there, but
the whole idea is just here we're introducing it to something new, and so was kind of done intentionally. Was here, I don't want it to be a rye whiskey, but I do want it to be. Here, if I was Canadian, it has that sense of it.
Well, it's really nice. It's my first thoughts. I want to say the nose pulled me in right now. I'd like some time, maybe a drop of water to try to get more at the layers.
So that's actually kind of important. So when we bottle, we always bottle a little bit higher than where we think it should be. So each barrel is harvested individually, and then myself and the young lady that helps me out in the distillery, we sit down with a whole bunch of dilutions, and we find out, it tastes the best, we think, right here. And so we always bottle a little bit higher than that, just because most people around the world would add a little bit of water to it.
Yeah. And I've heard different tales that way, that as you describe, you're anticipating most users and you want them to get it at where you really thought. Like, what is this released at? Sorry, I didn't check.
That's 49.
Yeah. So you want them at 47. I'm just making that up, but like something like that, right? And so, but then the idea is, well, for those of us to just pour and sip, we're missing an opportunity.
No, but the pour and sippers aren't as common. Like when I think. I have to put my marketing hat on every once in a while.
Sure.
I would say 80% of the people that we run into would have a little dash of water or a little bit of ice. And so when you put a product out there, that's kind of the rationale why we want to do some of those things. And when we say we overproof it a little bit, we're talking like 0.2. So if it's at 49, we probably think it's best at 48.8 or 48.7, somewhere in there. And
Oh, that's a small drop of water for sure.
oh yeah, just a hair, and that's all you need. That opens it up and it gives you that fresh burst of aroma, and it can do a lot of very beautiful things to a whiskey.
You know, the water that I dropped in here did something that I commonly get in whiskey that's got some oak structure, some tannins. I got a little more of that structure on the nose. The nose was
Yeah.
a little softer, not muted, but something like that at first, and the bit of drop of water brought in some of that other structure just right on the nose.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly what it should, because you're disrupting the equilibrium of all the lipids in the whiskey. And as soon as that happens, then you start getting some of those volatiles coming out. So that's just a good solid chemistry. If you could do that in high school, everybody would pass their grade 12 chemistry, but you're probably not good to serve whiskey.
Well, they'd certainly show up for the exam. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Hey, John, you was really too generous, and you didn't just send one, you sent more, and I want to talk about this one. Let me just zoom in so people can see.
Well, you asked the question of what's new, so I got to send you what's new. So actually, so speaking of what's new, do you have that old bottle with the Southeast 11?
I do. Hang on. It's the Triticale one. You bet.
Yeah. So that's what's new, is that we've rebranded. It's our 10th anniversary as a distillery this year. So we've gone completely, all the bottles now coming out will be Black Fox whiskey, not the Southeast 11. And lots of reasons behind it. But if you notice on the new label, it's supposed to resemble a storybook. And we always feel that the best whiskeys in the world, they usually come along with story. And we really want to encourage that thinking when they're drinking the whiskey. So that's also a little bit of what's new, and that's why I was really excited to be able to talk to you tonight.
Well, I have to say, even in the unboxing, when I was able to look into a beautiful gift package, this packaging right off the top is classy, engaging. You mentioned that your international markets are really, looking for that kind of quality and insight. And the information was just enough to keep me like, oh, what's in here? And it looks like this will be sharp on the shelf. It's a really good job. I don't know if you do it in-house, but whoever you worked with did an excellent job.
Yeah, we've assembled a team all across the world, from Portugal to Asia, all over the place to work on this design. So it's been quite a good experience over the last year.
Oh, that's awesome. And I will say, never know where my camera is. Your continued use of this copper penny is a lot of fun. I like that. I think Bruichladdich and a few others, I really like, if I can go somewhere and learn a little more, I like to know, hey, like when the crop was harvested, or when it was distilled, or what kind of oak has this spent some time in. It connects me a little bit, not really, but I feel more connected to the making of what's in here, and I love that story.
And it's even more than that. So yeah, to let you in on what's the fun things coming, but that penny becomes the key to a lot of things. So now when you put the information into, you put your code into the website, it'll register on a map where you are, so you can see all these whiskey bottles being opened up all over the world. But it invites you to start a blog about who you're sharing your whiskey with. So you can post either publicly or privately and say, well, Jane gave me this whiskey for my birthday, and I'm opening it up with, my best friend Mark, and we're sitting down to have a drink. And then that way, eventually you have your collection of pennies, and you can go back in history and see who you enjoyed some of those fine whiskeys with.
I love it, because I firmly believe story is a big part of how we enjoy and experience whiskey. I truly do. This conversation I'll remember because it's a good conversation, and I'm predisposed to love your whiskey because it's a good conversation. But I like that you're connecting people over it, and even creating a way to go back, putting in the code again and go, oh, I got that when, or I shared it with, and that's a really interesting. I'll look forward to that evolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now I would like to try this, but you didn't talk about this whiskey yet. This is a cask finish of some kind.
Yes. So this was there's an interesting story behind this whiskey. So I was actually had the chance. I was drinking some of Bruce Laddie's finer offerings, and I said, I've tasted this flavor before. I can't figure out what it was. And I came home and I looked through all my casks and I found this particular cask, and it kind of reminded me of that experience. Anyway, along walks my daughter, who says, "Oh, gee whiz, Dad, I'm getting married, and I should have a cask of whiskey." And I said, "Well, you can't have a whole cask of whiskey, but I'll give you part of this one for your wedding gift." And we bottled out. This is the balance of that, and it turned out to be. It's a real part of our family legacy because the goal at our distillery is to use all the crops that we grow. But this wasn't made from our own crop.
Oh,
This was made from that's a malt, like a whiskey made from malt barley.
okay.
And I swore when we opened the distillery I would never make a malt whiskey until my loving wife had is kind of known in the community as always searching out for a good deal. And there was a truckload of grain that was stranded and couldn't unload at the local brewery, and so she had gotten a very good deal on it. And we ended up making probably 40 barrels of malt whiskey, and this was how it ended up. But it turned out to be just such a stunning whiskey, and everybody was after us. Oh, well, you have to bottle that. You have to release it, like to the public because everybody wanted to enjoy it. So it's now on allocation. So some of it is going into each of our markets. We'll keep some here at the distillery,
Okay.
and there will be some ending up in Alberta at some select restaurants if everything
Okay.
goes according to plan.
And that is, this one's a little 46.7, I think. No, what's that?
It should be 48.7.
No, 48.1. I misread the cask.
41.
457. That's the problem with my eyes. I don't have bifocals right now, so I'm not getting the
So
smoke.
yeah, and the interesting thing about this, so we came across, we had an Amarone cask that had been used for making Amarone wine for the past 15 years. And so an Amarone wine is made from dried grapes. So basically, you harvest the grapes, you let them dry in the sun, and then you create a extremely full-bodied wine. It's not quite like an ice wine. It's not that sweet because they'll ferment it right down, but
Yep.
it's got so much character to it. So we had this beautiful cask that we had a chance to use, and it turned out we were just very, very happy with it. And
Definitely.
this one, we released this one. Other than at my daughter's wedding, we released it in Dubai this year and had it just wonderful, wonderful feedback from
Yeah.
our whiskey fans there.
Certainly darker fruit notes on the nose that you'd expect from
Yeah,
some.
you get all that plum and raisin and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, and it's absolutely delightful. And that's the trick to cask finishing whiskey is finding really good wine barrels, and that's the shame. Like you'll go out into the market, like into the stores, and you'll see something that's it's been finished in a PX cask, but the casks that they're using for finishing really are a lot of times are quite garbage. So to get those really good depths of flavor, you have to go, and you'll see them in the marketplace every once in a while, but usually they're at a price range where most people don't get to try them. So it's quite a thing. We take a lot of pride in selecting some of the casks that we're using, and it makes for a very good quality product.
Yeah. Now you mentioned what a great story to your daughter's wedding, limited release into some restaurants here in Alberta, but you had more than one cask finished in Amarone, no?
No, no,
Oh,
this is just there is
just
one.
one cask.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'll be more careful with who I share with. No, no, I'll gladly
No,
share.
we'll probably have another one in 10 years. But that's, and it's funny that we get that a lot, and everybody says, "Oh, we really would like a bottle of that," and we just, well, I'm sorry, that does not exist anymore.
Wow.
And that's, to me, that's the super fun part about making whiskey the way that we make it.
Yeah.
is that you end up with all the whiskey's good, and every once in a while you're going to find one that if you really like it, you better go out and buy another couple bottles because it will not be there anymore.
Yeah, and certainly from someone like yourself that you've indicated it's all single cask release. Even if you had another one, it would be different, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a different cask, breathed differently in your outdoor rack house, and it just would have different characteristics. Yeah. So I'm gonna have a little sip. I want to be part of the story. So cheers again, my friend.
Yes.
Oh, that's going to be a favorite. Someone called me out a while ago on my channel. Like I do, like actually really love rye. I have lots of rye. If I had anything almost as much as single malt, it's rye. But I tend to have a lot of malt whiskey. And right now, and that now is maybe like a year or almost two, my palate likes to play in different cask, dry wine finishes. Like I like well done sherries. They can be overdone. I get that. But this, oh, it's just rich. It's thick. It's chewy. It's just got all the right flavors. I'm getting just hints now of chocolate. I didn't get it up front, but I'm getting a little bit of that, which I do get in finishes like this. So that is really, really nice in the palate.
Yeah. No, it's we're really happy with that. And the CAST program for us, so you have to think, so we've been in the business for 10 years. We plan on being in the business for hundreds of years. So it's about trying new things, seeing what works, making really good notes so that, maybe it's our grandchildren or our great grandchildren will look back and say, oh, gee, I have a whiskey that tastes like this. Looking back at what Grandpa had done, this is maybe we could try something like this, and learning and exploring and stuff like that. So, cask finishing is not really a part of our business.
Mm.
It is like because we're doing it as an experimental thing, but our main goal is to release these really interesting, just single barrels of really good whiskey.
Awesome. Well, let's go all the way to the third that you sent my way. Now, I have opened this one. I got to get the right one. This one. Now, I say Triticale. How would you say it?
That's exactly how you pronounce it. You could become a crop scientist, certified agronomist.
Well, good, because every time I look at it, I'm like, I got to be saying it wrong. I don't
Yeah.
know, but that's how I would capture it. And
Yeah. So on the bottle, it'll have the Latin, which is Triticale.
yes,
Triticum is wheat. Cicale is cereale, is rye. So when the plant breeding was originally done, it's a blend between the two. So it becomes a little bit of both. And when you make the whiskey, it really is, it's a little bit of both. So a whiskey made from Triticale is never as intense as what you would have a straight rye whiskey.
yeah,
So rye whiskey, known for all those, what we would call baking spices, they're still in the background, but they're well rounded, and they just present themselves in a completely different manner. And that's the beauty of Triticale to me as a distilling grain. It is realistically to me it's second to none. It creates an absolutely exceptional whiskey.
I want to get more into the Triticale. I do want to run down those notes, but I also want to honor some questions. And not John, Wong asked a little bit about, Angel's share, evaporation. We began our conversation about pressure that being outside creates in the barrels, but can you talk a little bit about that concept of Angel's share and how is it different for you guys aging outside?
Yeah, so absolutely a very good question because the reason why everybody started putting whiskey in warehouses was to minimize their losses from losing it to evaporation. So if you could control the atmosphere a little bit, that was the goal. So in Scotland, you would aim for, an angel share of about 3%. Some of the better, like rick houses would be down, even 2.5%, which is pretty good. Your accountant loves you. The problem is that you really don't end up losing whiskey through the angel share creates good whiskey when you're done. So we end up with, because the way the barrels are treated by Mother Nature, we lose an average of 8% a year. So some of them are extremely high, and that's what you happen to have in front of you. and some of them are more typical in that 3 or 4%. But we average out at 8. So we're quite high by Canadian standards.
That is high. I've definitely heard different numbers, and your accountant doesn't love that. But I'm just saying.
But no, but realistically, so if you want to get into the accounting of it, if we can make a better whiskey quicker, you're better off that way. So we kind of we find that we would never want to age a whiskey probably more than 7 years.
Yeah.
And we typically like to harvest in that 5 to 6 year range. We never bring up how old it is because the storage conditions are so different that age becomes irrelevant. So we never out in the marketplace saying, oh, it's a 5-year-old whiskey or it's a 6-year-old whiskey. We select every barrel is done on flavor. If we think it's ready to go out to the public, that's when it's being bottled.
I understand, and I have been all over the map with age statements. I can see not putting it on here because younger age, some uninitiated or not informed consumer will just automatically equate that to less quality. Yeah. Whereas I have happily on my shelf some 2-year-old whiskeys that are some of my favorite whiskeys, and I'm happy that they say right on there, "Hey, buddy, this is 2 years old." Yeah. And I like that transparency, but I respect that it's tough to share across markets.
No, I think the consumer loses out because of that whole idea of older is better.
Yeah.
Because there are some amazing younger whiskeys that I would absolutely much rather drink than a 35-year-old something.
Now, let me be clear. In Canada, this is obviously 3 years or older because it says whiskey on the bottle. And the product that I'm talking about is actually out of the U.S., so they could call it a whiskey even though it's 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, we had a question from CY about Triticale, just about the grain. Just not really understanding a bit about the grain. Would you be okay to talk a bit about it?
Yeah, no, they're absolutely lovely. So it's from myself, like as a farmer's perspective, it's such a cool grain to talk about because the story starts hundreds of years ago in northern, the northern part of the United Kingdom. So Ireland, Scotland, they're not exactly quite sure where. But the concept was that at one time wheat used to grow very tall and you make bread out of it, but it always had a lot of problems with disease. So it'd get a lot of rust. If you had the wrong weather conditions, your crop would die and your livelihood would with it. Rye, on the other hand, it was extremely hardy. The problem was that it didn't make very nice bread. So kind of came up with the idea of, here, we could take these two plants and cross them. The interesting thing is that you can't, it's one of those crosses that would never really happen in nature. It needs a little bit of kind of human support in order to make the cross happen. So of course, when you're crossing two plants, you take the male part of them, the female part of the flower, and you pollinate them. The problem with rye and wheat is they have a different number of chromosomes. So the fella that originally did the cross, it was quite common at the time to use a medicine for gout, which was basically a whole bunch of a poultice that was made from roots that had been ground up. And if those roots were present when the cross was made, it would make a stable cross. And so they ended up making a cross 200 years ago and figured out it was a breakthrough in plant breeding, and it was just very neat. And so this variety of grain, or this type of grain, stayed around for literally 150 years until after the Second World War, and nobody had really done too much with it until after the Second World War. Everybody thought, oh, we're all going to die from starvation because we can't produce enough grain. The wheat still has this problem of getting too much disease. And Triticale kind of came to the fore of a lot of breeding programs around the world, notably in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, where we would do plant breeding in all three countries and then grow two crops back to back, going from a breeding institute called CIMMET out of Mexico City, and then up to Canada in Lethbridge. And we would do this plant breeding to try and accelerate it because the problem still was it tasted like rye. and people didn't like rye bread as much as what they liked bread made from wheat.
Wheat.
So the
Yeah.
plant breeders were trying to get some of the flavor out, and that's what ended up actually making it great, a, just such a great base grain for making whiskey because they had actually done, they had selected for flavors. And a lot of times as farmers, we don't select for flavor in our crops. We select for starches, we select for
Right.
protein, we do a
Yeah.
lot of other things.
Yep.
So it's one of those, it is such an interesting crop to study because it just goes to show the innovation that farmers have done in the areas of science throughout the ages, which is why we're able to live the way that we live now. Because if we wouldn't have done that work 200 years ago, we would still be, or thousands of years ago, we'd still be scrambling as hunters and gatherers and not being able to spend our time drinking whiskey.
Well, cheers to farmers. I'm going to try a little bit of this cask strength Triticale. I still maintain, first of all, what a wonderful, powerful burst of flavor, right? I didn't put any water on it. We're in that 58 territory. It's a lot of whiskey, and I'm glad it's the third whiskey of the night, not the first, because it would really, my palate would be in a little bit of shock. But I get rich, I get lots of flavors. But as I had this the other day, I thought I get a really strong interplay of some caramels and sugars. I get a mid palate of spicing, but as you said, it doesn't run me into hot rye. It just, there's some character going on here. But then it also dries, and I do get a lot of oaks, whether it's the 58 or this particular cask. And that's why I thought it was 2 years older than that other release.
Yeah.
Because to me, this one has a lot of oak. Now, I like a lot of oak. Ryan Egan is a guy who picks single casks out here for Wine and Beyond in Alberta. And all of his single picks tend, for me, my palate, like, you know, they gave him 5 barrels and he took the one that was the oakiest, that had the most backbone. And this speaks to me like a Ryan Egan pick. How did you choose this release? Like, how did you know, oh, this is it right here at this strength?
Well, so the first step when you go out and you're sampling the barrels, you're always tasting like at cask strength. And this one was just, well, I would just drink it like that. And typically, we don't do cask strength releases. So that's just not something, it's not a big enough marketplace for us to play in but it is getting to be a little bit more so. So now it's kind of, from a distiller trying to go out there and seeing what his customers want. Well, here's a real nice cask. Let's put it out and let's see what the public thinks of it. And it's just to kind of give you some idea of, like how quickly so we sent an email out a couple weeks ago. There's none left. There's actually, I think there's one bottle on the shelf and somebody had phoned in this afternoon speaking for it. But these things, they happen very quickly. So now we've got good feedback and says, okay, so we know these people really like cask strength. Next time, that we're releasing one, we're making sure to contact these people.
Hey, that's a good tie-in, John. Lots of my people, the people that have shown up here, thank you guys for joining us, are from across the country, right? And I want to know, first of all, is there any way they can order from you? And second, if so, do you have like a mailing list or some way to like find out first? Because you mentioned this stuff sells pretty quick.
Yeah, so absolutely. It's the mailing list you can access online, like off the website. There's a store online that where you can purchase product if you're in the right area of Canada. And hopefully, the indications we're getting from the government is saying that they're going to facilitate to make that easier in the future, so which is very good. And and especially direct to consumer, so that works out quite nicely. I do admit I really fail on, sometimes we end up with some really interesting things. And so okay, everybody's gonna laugh, but this is about I'm in it every day. So like I'll go out in the whiskey storage and I'll say, oh, this is amazing. And we'll take it down, we'll bottle it. And I forget that it was, oh, well, that was really special. And it'll just go out with the rest of the
Oh,
kind of regular inventory. And I'm getting better at it, but it's something do have to make a little bit more commitment to. We've got a lot of people now around the world that just love some of these whiskeys, and have to make a commitment and say, no, actually, this one is really interesting because of this. Are you interested in getting it? Because it's a shame where, like people, like they just won't know, and if you don't know, that's not. I'm inviting people into our little distillery and into our world of agriculture in order to have some fun with them. And it's my fault that I'm not engaging with them as much as what I could.
One of the things I mentioned, first of all, that's great because it means every now and then there's those special casts that are just sitting right alongside. Well, all your casts to be special, but it kind of makes an Easter egg type. Try to find that special release. I had a question here though about samples. Like, every now and then you'll see like Berclati, I've seen like where all of a sudden you can get 4 small 200 ml bottles together that kind of show their range. Have you thought about doing something like that?
We have, and in the past, we used to have little sample kits where you get like one small little blended one, the cask one, and a single grain. And then with the new bottle design, we just haven't quite got there yet, but anticipate that we will start doing that again in the future. So it's like, from a tourism point of view, it's absolutely amazing. And a lot of hotels around the world will put them out as gifts. Instead of putting chocolates on your pillow, they'll have little samples of a nice whiskey, which is quite nice when you go visiting somewhere. So
Okay,
absolutely,
I need to stay at those places. Like chocolates on the pillow already feels special for me. A lot of places I stay don't have that. If I stayed at a place that had samples of your whiskey on the pillow, I'm coming back. I am seeking that place out. Any hospitality people out there, that's a great idea.
Yeah. No, it's what makes our industry a lot of fun, because you're playing on the border of hospitality, and you're meeting with some of the best chefs in the world and some of the best palates, but also people that their goal is to make sure people have a really good experience. And boy, I tell you, they sure come up with some really fun ideas on things to do.
So it's all no. I'm trying to say this. Sometimes personal taste is just that. It's personal taste. So what I'm about to say means no bearing on what's good, bad, or even better. In this case, I'm just going to say that nose on the Amarone cask has really pulled me in. I'm really liking that nose.
Well, that's good. So actually to that, so the whole idea of your palate is your palate. I'm just in the middle of reading a really interesting book, and I can't remember the name of the author, but it's all about aromas, and it's called Nosedive, and I would highly recommend that you get a copy of it.
Nosedive.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it goes from a chemist's point of view all about the aromas that we smell every day.
Okay.
And the author points out that in the Amazon they eat ants, and the ants, when they cook them, happen to taste like ginger and lemongrass fried,
Okay.
like a
Yeah.
stir fry. And so they had done this little experiment where they had this world famous chef go to the Amazon and prepare this dish, very traditional dish from their part of Asia, and serve it there. And everybody was so astounded with the dish because it tasted exactly like ants. And that's where this book goes into. Aromas and flavors are based so much in our subconscious of our memory and how we grew up. Like if you sat on your father's lap when you were young and he smoked a cigar,
Yeah.
you would understand what that smell is.
Yeah.
For someone who'd never had that experience, you would never understand it. I always say in our Triticale whiskey, it reminds me of a harvest day, because there's
Yeah.
a sense in there that I understand innately as a farmer.
Yeah.
But to try and explain that to someone who's never been on a farm is difficult.
No, and I once heard some whiskey guys. They were great, and they were talking through again, as you said, like, and they were talking about how this tasting note was stuck up and whatever, and it was marzipan. And I'm like, no, I've lived in Europe for a little bit, and marzipan was just a common thing. And then they went on to talk about different cereals, like breakfast cereals, and how it reminded them of this and reminded them of that. I'm like, we all need to connect with what our experience is. As you described, if you sat on your father's lap and had that smell, you would know that, but no one else would. So that is an
Well,
interesting.
and there's the realization if you're not wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, especially like like you get together in a whiskey club, and some of the people like some things, and some of the people like these huge peaty whiskeys.
Yeah.
That is the greatest thing in the world. You should like what you like. Like, don't let anybody tell you that. Well, no, that's not a good whiskey. If you like it, well, darn it, that's the best whiskey you've probably ever had. And it's actually so it's interesting. You were saying that the cask finished, it drew you into the smell. So we did a big whiskey event in Dubai called Malt Live, and we had a Triticale whiskey, the blended whiskey, and this cask finished whiskey there because we had released it there, and a third of the crowd liked each one, which
Okay.
I thought was quite amazing because to me that made me feel really good because somebody liked all of our things. But I always also thought it was quite intriguing that not everybody was drawn to here. I like this one; it's the most expensive one, or I like this one; it's the cheapest one. And like they just liked it.
Yeah.
Just you could never guess which one they were going to like, but they always liked one, which was
Yeah.
at least that worked out.
That's, I think we're collecting stories like that, and I appreciate that you and I hope we're encouraging everyone here that is somewhere on their whiskey journey to live in that discovery and also that understanding of others. We're going to have different reactions to different things, and we're going to pick up different notes. And I feel it's great to celebrate that together, as
Yeah.
opposed to try to make every whiskey compete until there's really just one whiskey that we all agree is the best. Because I just don't think that's a realistic journey.
No, and I don't think that would take all the fun right out of it.
It sure would.
Yeah.
John, is there anything you want to say to the folks here or on the replay? We've talked about how we can get on to your website. We can buy direct if we're fortunate to be in an area that we can get it. Is there anything else you want to share though about where you're going next or what's happening next for Black Fox Farm and Distillery?
Oh, God, well, there's lots. It's our 10th anniversary this summer, so if you get a chance to visit, we just encourage people so much. We're open, 12 months out of the year, but summertime, we are a working farm. We grow everything from pumpkins to flowers to the grains that go in the spirits. There's always lots to do. We'll have the symphony out. We'll have, lots of good music and lots of good times. And so that's happening here. The other thing is like just that whole idea of the explore the Canadian whiskey market. There is some stunning, not just stunning whiskey, but stunning people involved in our industry. Go out, search them out, find out what's happening, and just enjoy that whole idea of being, the just exploring what's new out there.
I love that encouragement and love the reminder that it's really not that far for me to drive. I'm in the Edmonton area. I've done the drive for far less. I've got to come out and visit you guys. It looks like an amazing place to be at any time. Like you said, the working farm. So there's all sorts of things going on, but you also do experiences and tastings. I think you even do a make your own gin and so on. So it sounds like a really cool place to visit.
Yeah, no, we try and we're getting better and better at it all the time. And we actually had staff training today, and it's just we hire people on purpose because they're good with people.
Right.
And that's what we want people when they come out. When you come, we want you to really feel welcome. If you hang around too long, we'll put you to work.
Yeah, I can respect that a lot. Look, John, it's been a great night. Thank you for sharing this whiskey with me. For those that tuned in now and those that tuned in later, I really encourage to check out, as you said, all the cool things happening in Canadian whiskey, but certainly at Black Fox Farm and Distillery, you guys really have a lot of special things going on. Thank you, John.
Well, and thank you, John. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You guys have a good night.
Good night.